I'm Ray Schillens.
This is Bruce Abbott.
Welcome to Feel the Ad Love,
a podcast produced by Radio Lounge at RadioLoungeUSA.com, featuring the inside scoop on advertising and marketing and podcasting and all kind of cool stuff. And we have guest interviews with some of the brightest minds in those industries. In each episode, we explore current trends and topics and the latest news and events in our community.
Lots of folks wonder who Radio Lounge is, and, well, we're going to tell you right now. We're audio production services. We do that for broadcast, for film, on-location audio experiences, and, of course, digital media. We also do voice coaching in the production of high-end voice talent demos.
And we also do podcasts, as you're listening to this one here. We do a lot of podcast production. We do a lot of podcast training. In fact, we have a podcast for podcasters that we will be launching here in the next few weeks. Really a podcast for marketing professionals and businesses that want to use podcasting not as a hobby, but as an extension of their marketing capabilities. And we're going to be talking about, everything from the podcast prep and production and performance to marketing, monetization, and more. How's that for alliteration? That was, and so we're going to be having that coming up, launched in the next few weeks. So we'll fill you in more on the details as that gets a little closer.
So many words beginning with the letter M. I'm really impressed by that. Somebody else who you'll be impressed with is Joe Biondi, an account executive, underwriting and sponsorship for Houston Public Media. If you're not familiar with Houston Public Media, if you're not familiar with NPR, I'm sure you are, but you would not believe what Houston Public Media is doing here in the Houston market, not only on the broadcast side, but on the streaming side, on the public service side. Lots and lots of stuff going on there. You're going to like this interview we did with Joe Biondi. Let's take a listen. Joe Biondi is an account executive and underwriting and sponsorship type person at NPR here in Houston, which is Houston Public Media. And Joe is also a brand new member of the American Ad Federation Houston, and he's on the board now. You got an important position, a very important position, Joe.
Is that right?
They pay you the big bucks for it.
I'm still waiting on that part, but
yeah. And don't expect a check, baby, because it's not coming anyway soon.
No.
You know, the thing that fascinates me, my background is radio, and I love radio, and so does Joe, as a matter of fact.
Mm-hmm.
Joe's father's cousin was a guy by the name of Dick Biondi. Now,
the Biondi name in Houston?
Biondi name in the country, because Dick Biondi used to be, what was it, Joe, on the Big KB? He was on CKL, wasn't he? He was everywhere.
Yeah, he actually, CFL, WLS, the Big KB out of Buffalo. He started, coincidentally enough, in Alexandria, Louisiana. That was his first full-time air position, and went from there back east, and then ended up on KBW in Buffalo, and then signed on what became WLS, the Rock and Roll Flamethrower. I think it's at 890 AM in May of 1960 when they switched it over from the Prairie Farm station. At the time, it was owned by Sears, which is why they got the call letters WLS, which stood for World's Largest Store. And he was the first rock and roll disc jockey. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Radio Broadcasters Hall of Fame, and he just recently came off the air at 80 plus years old. I talked to him not too long ago. He's doing well, but as you can imagine, he's getting on in years. But he's had, what a life, right?
Oh yeah, what a life! Is that something that got you interested in getting into media and radio and such, or what?
Yeah. When I was a young guy, my dad told me that his cousin was a disc jockey, and when I was growing up here in Houston, I was listening to Barry Kay, the Boogeyman, and Captain Jack on 610 KILT, Jolly and James, Stevens and Pruitt, Hudson and Harrigan. I was just fascinated with radio, and then at night I used to go to sleep listening to the CBS Radio Mystery Theater on my little AM radio transistor radio. All right, and then I grew up. My dad was a big fan of Stan Freberg and all of those old, audio comedy guys. So that always filled my head, and I was not good at sports because I had a really horrible problem with one of my eyes, which prevented me from having depth perception, which that comes in handy if you're like shooting baskets or hitting baseballs. So I
wait a minute, it's over here. No, it's not.
Yeah, I wish somebody would have figured that out before I quit. But So I was just fascinated with radio. And when I went to Texas Tech in 1980, I walked right into the station up there and said, I want to be a disc jockey. And they kind of looked sideways at me. And a few months later, after reading news and whatnot, I got to start to do as a music jock, and then rode that for 12 years until I came off the air at the end of 1992.
Wow. So big background there. Go for it, Rick.
I love it. You were mentioning the Houston radio things. It's kind of funny for me because guys like Hudson and Harrigan, Captain Jack, Rick Candy, I got a chance to work with those folks several years. So here in the Houston market, with Houston Public Media, so how exactly is Houston Public Media a good fit for this market? I mean, especially now at this time.
That's a really good question. In my mind, I came from the commercial side of radio, and then I had at one point switched over to cable TV and advertising, sales, and management. But I've always had an ear bent towards the programming and the product side of things. And I've always, if I can say, I've been one thing relative to the on-air guys that I worked with after I came off the air, which is I was very respectful of what they did and how they did it, and I understood their lives and all the energy and creativity that goes into doing that well. And so I worked in radio when Rush Limbaugh was blowing up, in the early 90s. And I saw sort of a polarization of the media start to take place. So my heart's always been in the programming side of things. And when I was interviewing for this position here at Houston Public Media, I've always been a fan of NPR for a number of reasons, but mostly because of the long form stories and the more or less anti-bias, middle of the road reporting that you can get. I think it's as close as you can get anywhere. And then I was a huge fan of PBS TV8 when I was growing up, because that's where I saw Benny Hill and Monty Python and Nova and Science and all of these other things. So when I was interviewing here to answer the question, was that I told my boss that, you may not like what you hear on public media, but here's the thing: nobody's screaming at you, because that's what really has kind of frosted me on what I see on TV and what I hear in some cases on radio, is just this unending talking over one another, and the loudest guy in the room makes the point. And I don't hear that on public media. And I think that allows us to have a venue where you may or may not agree with the opinions expressed, but you have the chance to hear them, and you can agree or disagree, but nobody's yelling at you at the same time.
I mean, media's really changed in the last 5 years. I mean, when you think about what you were just saying, it's okay to just come on there and scream at each other, and nobody takes turns. And but speaking of changes, how has Houston Public Media changed over say the last 5 years?
Well, I've been in the chair here 2 years, and prior to that, was still living in Albuquerque. So what I understand of the history, from what I've been able to glean, is that as it moved into a more news-focused product, the radio station that I remembered when I was going to U of H and when I left Houston in 1980 was music at some times, news at another time. It was kind of what might be considered a middle of the road format, or full service format. That there was classical music during the day, and there was news in the morning and the afternoon, and maybe a local program here or there. But as public radio has evolved, and you see more stations around the country going to a full news product, that's where I think Houston Public Media, News 88.7 and NPR found itself going, and then decided to do that as well as it can be done. Houston's a big market, the number 4 or 5 market for radio in the country. So this station plays a role and has, I think, a very vital role in the dissemination of information. And as we saw with Hurricane Harvey, which happened prior to me starting here, the station played a critical role in getting information out. So it's very much a part of the fiber of Houston media, and I think it's evolved as public radio has evolved around the country into more of a purely news product that serves a very important purpose.
I think you're absolutely dead on right for that. It is indeed a part of Houston, and it shows it every day. And I love also going back to what you said earlier as well. It is not a sophisticated or stuffy approach, but it's an intelligent approach to talking to the listeners, which I really, really appreciate, because I believe that some other types of talk shows do dumb it down basically to speak to a mass. But you stay the course there, and that's an important thing. I want to ask you something, Joe. Yeah. The Beyond the Billion campaign, it's in the news. It's a big thing right now. Does Houston Public Media see any direct benefits as a result of that? And if not, well, why not?
That's a really good question, and I'm not as familiar with the campaign as I should be. I know that there's a thought out there that the government supplies the majority of our funding, right? And that gives people a platform to beat up on public media that it's taxpayer funded and it doesn't express my opinion, yada yada yada. The reality is that it's less than 10% of any operating budget for any public media outlet, and specifically for here at Houston Public Media. So we are very, very reliant on subscribers and sponsors and underwriters, and so that is a huge campaign. I don't know how that all splits out, and I wish I could give you a more lucid answer, but I don't want to say something that is factually incorrect. So I don't want to duck it either, but I want to be honest with you.
You did a good job of kind of answering
Just spin it
that.
like the politician.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I was going to ask you this because, obviously Houston Public Media depends, a lot on the national efforts of NPR. And do you guys have a local media in the mix? I mean, how important is that local media to your efforts, especially when it comes to underwriting?
Well, there's a newsroom one floor above us where there is 17 local reporters and a news director and a digital team, and so we have reporters that work beats like old reporters, or the reporters of the days gone by do, and they are very dedicated to doing journalism the way journalism should be done. So what that affords us here in the underwriting and sponsorship side of things is that when we go to our clients and we say, would you like to underwrite and sponsor Houston Public Media, and then we can give you mentions on our air, there's a great mix of the product that's nationally originated, like All Things Considered and Morning Edition, BBC, for instance, and then we have local hosts that are helping to weave all of that together with the local newscasts that we get in the mornings and the afternoons, and so it gives us a platform to have that local content, to have that local feel to not only what goes out on News 88.7, but also in the case of TV8 when we do locally produced vignettes, for instance, for like the upcoming Ken Burns country music documentary that's coming up. We've produced small interstitials and vignettes which feature local artists doing country cover songs. So we have that local presence, which I think is critical for us to then bring to our clients and say, by sponsoring and underwriting Houston Public Media, not only are you supporting this product here, but you're getting this audience that supports people that support Houston Public Media. So it's a very symbiotic and very powerful relationship. I think that local programming and that local focus brings to the efforts that we do here in underwriting and sponsorship.
And plus, you guys, you've got a very creative staff there. What kinds of new ways are you able to engage underwriters, kind of beyond that traditional method?
Well, that's good timing on that question. I spent several hours yesterday preparing to do a download for one of the local agencies here in town, the advertising agencies. There's always a perception about, wherever you are, there's a perception that is some person's reality. And when I came to Houston Public Media and started digging into what I call the toolbox of what we have to work with, it occurred to me very, very fast that my perception was incorrect. There are so many tools and platforms that we have to use. For instance, we have locally produced podcasts with Houston Matters, Unwrap Your Candies, Party Politics, Encore Houston, for instance, that we can use for local underwriters. They can sponsor those. Then we also have the local newscasts. We have Marketplace, which comes in nationally. And so we have national platforms, we have local platforms, we have our digital platforms. Within the digital platforms of HoustonPublicMedia.org, there's a whole slew of places that our underwriters and sponsors can put either website advertising. We're not advertising; it's not advertising per se, but they can put messages up there which help drive people back to their websites. And then on TV8, with the local production of like the interstitials and the local sponsorship of country music by Ken Mearns, we can dovetail into that programming. So the platform in and of itself is much broader and much deeper than I think that the perception is out there in the advertising community. And so that's part of my job, is to help educate people on what that we do bring to the table, and that's a lot.
I've always felt that Houston Public Media, NPR for that matter, has always been kind of the grandfather of the podcast format. In other words, NPR always went out, told a story, went a little bit more in depth, again with a sophisticated but not stuffy attitude, an intelligent attitude. And really, when you look at all the podcasting that's going on today, it really sounds like an extension of what you guys do on the air. So I was really excited when you talked about that. So you are taking the things that you have on the air and you're going well beyond that. And does that also relate to sponsorship opportunities for Houston Public Media?
Yeah, it does. One thing I forgot to mention is that we also have the ability to Geo-Target national podcasts, which are generated from PRX, which is the public radio podcast producing wing in New York City. So our local sponsors can, be in front of some of those nationally oriented or nationally generated podcasts as well. So that does provide me opportunities to go to my clients and prospects and say, okay, what is it that you're looking to accomplish with your underwriting and sponsorship, and how then can we take the pieces of this puzzle and put it together so that it not only are you going to reap the benefit of supporting Houston Public Media, but the listeners and the viewers of Houston Public Media do support the supporters. So in that kind of reciprocal way, I bring a value back to the sponsors and the underwriters to, ideally help them with their goals, whatever their goals may be. So I say a lot of my job is to go in and, be a doctor, if you will, and ask a lot of questions and see, what solutions or which problems I can help address. I found in my years in commercial media that at some points, some of the people that I'd worked with would just say, here's a package, take it out and sell it. And what I found with doing things like that, in some cases, not all cases, it was to solve a problem the radio station or the TV network had, not necessarily a problem that the client had. And I found if I have any success or any expertise at all, it's to go in and discern what it is that a sponsorship or an underwriter in this case would need to solve, and how can we use our tools then to help affect that in a positive way.
There's something about NPR and even the programming that you guys have that just seems to really connect more with listeners, maybe more than other types of programming. Why do you think that is? Is it that a lot of it is the storytelling component that we love to listen to stories? Is that maybe what makes it so special and such a good outlet for the listeners?
I agree with that. I think that part of the appeal, again, is that it's a conversation. Podcasting, I think one of the reasons podcasting has really exploded is because it's bringing back the art of conversation. A friend of mine runs the iHeart Media stations in Salt Lake City, and he and I were talking about that the art of conversation is coming back because, we're in a kind of an information truncated society, where you just get bits and pieces here and there on your smartphone or wherever. And the way that NPR puts the product forward with long form advertising, not just 20-second news bits, but, let's take 2, 3, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is, dig into this story, do some research, interview people, edit it, put it together. I think it's a much more respectful presentation of information primarily. And then because it is respectful of the listener's intelligence and their engagement, that there's that bond that happens with, people like myself who've been fans of public media forever and ever, because I could listen and I could form my own opinion and I could take the information in, agree or disagree with it. But it wasn't being shoved down my throat. It was being presented to me and in a respectful manner that I actually have my own brain and thoughts and things like that. So I think that's a large part of why there's a huge engagement. I did a research piece last year for something we were doing here, coming at it from my old programming brain when I was on the air in media in radio. And I looked at how many people prefer News 88.7 as a percentage of our audience, and then how many people listen to us exclusively. And the most recent numbers I ran just yesterday were like 84% of our audience prefers us first. 27% listens to nothing other than Houston Public Media, News 88.7, which as a programmer is nirvana. You want that sort of engagement. You want that sort of loyalty. And in doing that, you get stark raving fans, and that just makes everything work better. So I think, sorry, I'm kind of rambling on here, but I think that is part of the appeal and the reason for the engagement and the loyalty that you hear. And that
I have to ask, what's some of your favorite programming on there?
Oh, it's gonna sound silly, but wait, don't tell me.
Of course. I mean, my family had this little tradition, our Saturday morning with our car guys.
Yeah,
click and clack, and then into wait.
I know the guy died. Okay, but can't you bring him back? I mean, come on, come on.
Well,
everybody loves wait, don't tell me. I mean, it's just. But so what are some of your favorite programs? Maybe some of the national programs, maybe some of the local programs.
Locally, I love listening to Houston Matters. I think Craig Cohen does a phenomenal job. And David Pittman is our morning show host. He weaves that tapestry together between NPR and Morning Edition and our local stuff like an artist paints. So where I really became a fan of NPR was with afternoons, Morning Edition, All Things Considered. Years and years ago, I became a fan of All Things Considered, and that's what sucked me right into it. And then as I moved back to Houston and got involved with Houston Public Media and, started listening to Wait, Don't Tell Me in the mornings when I go out for what I consider a jog, most people would consider a fast walk. I have my headphones on and I'm listening to Morning Edition. I love listening to Marketplace because you get some really kind of solid economic news, that doesn't have a political agenda behind it. So those would be the places where I hang my hat right now. I love listening to Think and the Texas Standard, which are statewide, programs that we're a part of with the Texas Public Media Network. You get to hear what's going on in other parts of the state. Houston is so big, it's hard to keep up with everything going on in Houston, but Texas, it's like a whole other country. I don't know if you've ever thought of that, but there's so much going on around the state, and those particular Texas Public Media statewide newscasts are really awesome as well.
Yes, but when will KUHT bring back the classics, the Monty Python, the Bill?
Well,
those come back.
All right, Joe, how much money is it going to take, baby? Here's the thing, okay? We'll get
I recently, even though I think I've had access to this for a while, as a contributor to Houston Public Media and TV8, I have access to what's called Passport. And Passport is an archive of public media or, NPR programming. I haven't looked to see if Monty Python's there, but you gave me a job for tonight. I'll go back and call the app up and take a look and see if it's there. Because
please let us know that, okay?
Growing up in Houston as a kid, that was like the closest thing to sneaking in and watching a rated R movie was to be able to catch Benny Hill and Monty Python after Mom and Dad went to bed.
Oh, I watched it with my dad. I mean,
he was part of the progressive family then. Yeah.
Yeah. So
from your dad's cousin, probably.
Yeah.
So.
Don't tell Mom.
Yeah.
So you're a perfect fit for this job, aren't you, Joe? I mean, this is like this was made for you. It feels like, doesn't it?
It's been they've given me a place to land because I came to Houston without a job when we moved back here. My wife and I moved back just a little over 2 years ago. A lot of family things were happening. It was just time to get home. But that was the only thing where I was like, I've never done that without a place to land. So Houston Public Media gave me that opportunity. And then secondarily, and just as important, I think, is joining the Advertising Federation gave me the opportunity to network with people in the industry. So in a pretty short time span, I've been able to get to know a lot of people in the market, and that's helped me out greatly with what we do here, and help me understand Houston and the media market more than I have. So I'm grateful to not only Houston Public Media but the Advertising Federation for being so welcoming.
And you got to my next question here. You are now a very active member on the American Advertising Federation board. You hold a title. You are a secretary.
Well, yeah.
Talk about your experience so far, Joe, and why you came to participate as a board member.
I again, knowing that I needed to network when I got back to town, I went to several Houston Business Journal events. And I looked up the Houston Ad Fed and I said, well, I've got to go. I've just got to start meeting people. I knew a lot of people that knew a lot of people in the radio world and TV world when I came to town. But that was still 2 or 3 degrees of separation. And I wanted to, shake somebody's hand and get to know them personally. So I went to my first Ad Fed luncheon probably about 2 years ago and stood there like a fish out of water. I was just like, I don't know who to talk to. I don't know what to say. And a woman from KTRK, and I'm forgetting her name, was kind enough to come up and introduce herself. And that started the ball rolling. And I got to meet her. And I started collecting business cards and writing thank you notes. And then I started volunteering for anything that they needed help with. And that led to volunteering for 2 of the American Advertising Federation awards. And just getting involved there. And then somebody said, well, would you like to come on the board? And I said, absolutely. How can I help? And so that was the entree onto the board.
Well, we love having you there. And
thank you.
Coming off of, we just had an event today. We're recording this, and we had an event today that was so cool.
Yeah.
And it worked so well. And I get the vibe, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but I get the vibe that this new year, John Manlove as our CEO, chairman and such, this is going to be one heck of a great year. Don't you feel that, Joe? I
do feel that. And I'm, as a semi-musician, I was in a band for 30 years as well in Albuquerque. And I've had the great fortune of playing in front of huge crowds and small crowds. And just music has always been a passion of mine. Why does that relate to what your question was? Well, I've always known that sensing the energy of an organization is primary to understanding whether or not it's going to make some difference. And so I've always tried to tune in to the energy of my clients, for instance, and the organizations that I'm with to see where that energy is calibrated. Because when the energy is high, when there's that kind of drive to make it better, things do improve. And I really, really feel that now this year with the Ad Fed, that there's a lot of commitment with the people on the board that want to, bring the programming in like we had today, which was just crazy good. and then involve more people in the advertising community, and figure out what the next iteration of it is. How does the Houston Ad Fed then get on the map nationally as the guys to watch? And that may sound like a big, hairy, audacious goal, but like Casey Kasem used to say, shoot for the moon, and even if you miss, you're among the stars, right? So let's think big and let's think creative and let's go for it.
So, were you a student at U of H?
For a little while, yeah. I ended up going to Texas Tech. I graduated from Straight Jesuit in 1979. Went to U of H for a little while. Wasn't quite a fit for me, so I went to work. I'm going to name some things that people may remember. Cutter Bill's Western World on Westheimer. I worked there for 8 or 9 months, and then I went and worked offshore for Western Geophysical, and then went to Texas Tech, came back, went back for another year. I worked my second summer offshore as well. It was a great job for a young guy that was trying to figure out his path in life. And then from there, got involved in the radio business in Lubbock, Texas. From there, went to Austin, was there for a couple of years, and then Beaumont for a little bit, and then went back to Albuquerque, and I came off the air after 4 years in Albuquerque. So, that was kind of my educational path. Houston, or University of Houston, then Texas Tech. And then I, took some classes at University of New Mexico too. So I'm on the 20-year plan.
It's kind of funny. It has all come full circle.
Yeah, you're back home, baby.
Back home.
So one last question, dude. When you were in the band, did you have hair, Joe?
Well, that's how long I was in the band. When I started in the band,
I started with hair.
Yeah. And now when we play, I wear caps. So
there you go. Yeah. I had a feeling that was your answer. Joe Biondi, account executive, underwriting sponsorship, KUHF, Houston Public Media. Joe, it's been a pleasure having you here today. I really am excited about the things that Houston Public Media has done and is still going to do. It is indeed one of my favorites. And I said it before, but you are just a perfect fit for this organization. And one of these days, we're going to get you out here at the lounge so we can hear your chops on whatever guitar you want to play it on, okay?
I can't wait. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on.
Ray and Bruce saying thank you so much for listening to Feel the Ad Love.
And check out our website, RadioLoungeUSA.com. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or whatever platform you like to use. And that way you never miss a show.
And while you're at it, if you found value in this show, we would appreciate a rating on iTunes. If you'd simply tell a friend about the show and share it on social media, that would be really cool. Thank you.
Hey, Thanksgiving's coming up. I think you should share it at the Thanksgiving table. Why not? Come on. The family's all there.
Oh, Mom.
Copyright 2019, Radio Lounge. All rights reserved.
Join us next time for another episode of Feel the Ad Love.